And for a coach, it's important to know where your student athletes are. I've made classic mistakes in the past where I've pushed my athletes over the edge and wondered why we didn't play well. Well, you have to come back as a coach and go, oh, yeah, that was me.
It's hard to look yourself in the mirror at that
Totally.
point.
It totally is. And the responsibility you have as a head coach is something that a lot of people don't take the time to evaluate. Something as simple as what you say to a student or to an athlete can affect their performance. We operate in a world where words can really have devastating effect, or just your demeanor. I mean, I think of the fact that when I was a player, I was pretty upbeat. I was the one that was in your face, rah, rah, rah.
I was the same.
Right?
It shows today in our personalities.
It does, and that's the way I coach. And there are times when that type of a coaching approach is completely relevant. There's a time when that approach is completely irrelevant. Unfortunately, and the best example I have is a championship match. Who was in the face of this players going, oh, we need this one, we need it, right? When, in fact, I should have been the opposite. I should have been a calming influence. They wanted to win just as bad as I did. So what did I do? I pushed them past that level of optimal performance. And then you think about it and you go, oh, and that was a couple years after the fact, and I was a young coach at the time.
Yeah.
And I went back to do my grad work, and I took a motor learning class, and I'm like, oh, no, that was me. I may have pushed them over. And it's kind of like one of those things where you want to go back and apologize, but it's like, well, sorry, guys, that's right.
Another thing that I've grown to realize after all the work and hours that I've invested into these kids, there starts to become a fine line of a relationship and professionalism. And I start to see it already now where I'm tweeting about lacrosse and one of the kids sees it on our official page and they're like, oh, Blake has a Twitter, I want to follow him. Mm-hmm. Or Blake has a Snapchat, I want to follow him because they have my phone number because I give them an opportunity to communicate with me. So if they ever need anything, I'm there. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a text, a phone call, FaceTime, anything. Yep. Where do you really meet that fine line and dance and try to balance the line of being a person there and build a relationship almost as a friend aspect of a coach to I need to be professional just because I am the head assistant lacrosse coach for a high school team where they're still at a young age, they don't really understand the magnitude of a situation that could happen for us as a professional.
Well, I think that's a great question to ask because you look at any young coach, especially where you're at, you're not that far removed from high school in the scope of a lifespan, right?
Which is hard because I'm actually graduated from that high school. Yeah. So they know me even more. They know you.
You're not that far ahead in age versus a 40 or 50-year-old head coach.
Right.
So that is a fine line. I think it's important to realize that in the coaching world, you're going to know aspects about your players that perhaps teachers don't know.
Or parents don't
know. But certainly there's, obviously I'm going to put this plug out, there's certain things that happen that you have to report if it's a case of abuse or anything like that. But you're going to deal with issues by the very nature of what your job is, as far as personal, emotional, and things of that nature. But I think it's important to draw that line that you're going to be there and support that student athlete anything and everything you can. But there's always a point where it should not go to. Hey, Blake, you want to come out with us tonight? Hey, Blake, you want to come over here? So there's certain aspects that I have seen in the past where young coaches have actually got themselves in trouble because they didn't know how to draw that line. They may be completely relevant, a completely competent coach, but from that aspect, they don't know that line. That, well, maybe whether it's college or whatever, well, maybe I should just go drink with my players. Well, that's not a very good line to draw or to cross. There's aspects of a coaching profession that aren't always as black and white as that issue. But there's going to be times when you're going to be faced with a decision to make. And before you make it, maybe you want to bounce that idea off of someone else, whether it's your head coach, a mentor that you've looked up to in the past, a past coach, and say, hey, I've got this situation. How do you think I should handle it? So don't be afraid to seek out that advice because you may be thinking one thing and someone with a little more experience may be thinking it a different way. But it's very important to draw that line. Like if that comes up, that you make that hard stance. No, that is not a line recross. The best example I can give was when I was student teaching. I taught an aerobics class. Mm-hmm. It wasn't my ideal choice, but it was what my cooperating teacher was doing. there was one male in the class. The rest were female out of 30 students. And we taught in these pods. And one day, this one student came up. She was a female and chest bumped me. Well, I don't have to sit there and tell you the anatomical differences between a male and a female, but there was obviously some body contact there. So I'm thinking to myself, well, how do I handle this? Because that was inappropriate. So the next day, she happened to be late. So what did I do? I made an example of her. You're late. I wouldn't say yelp, but I raised my voice in front of the class to her that's saying, this is what time class starts. It's unexcusable to be late, to help establish that boundary that I am the teacher, although I was a student teacher at the time, and yes, you in fact are the student. So if you come up with examples or situations like that, my best advice would be take the hard stance.
Yeah.
To set that tone that,
as
I'm
much
your
as
coach.
uncomfortable it would be.
It wasn't, I didn't like doing it, but I had to do it because
Yeah.
I didn't want to see that grow into something where it's like I have to explain. No, thank you.
Right. The next thing I wanted to move into is specifically when you are involved into a professional standpoint of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many things that go into that. There's an administration that is a part of you being a part of a school district or a university. There's always people looking above you, looking down. So you're having to balance the administration on one side, players right in the middle, and then parents on one side as well. How do you really combat all the people that you have to deal with? Because you have to say one thing to the administration, you have to say one thing to the administration, one thing to the parents, but your main focus is these kids. How do you really balance a parent says, why isn't Tommy playing?
Yeah.
Or you need to play these kids because their parents are riding us.
Yeah. That's a hard balance to walk. Ultimately, the administrators are your bosses.
Yeah.
So if they're happy, if you're doing your job well, they're going to be happy, in theory. So by the very nature of doing your job well, that'll help appease the administrative part. But there certainly may be instances where they come and say, hey, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? You may be forced to make a hard decision. Whether it's a principal, it's superintendent, it's an AD, it's whatever it is, you can lay out your case. This is why he or she isn't playing. This is why these other players are playing, and that's my decision. You can choose to change your decision if you're getting enough pressure, or you can choose to stick to your guns. It's going to be up to you. Hopefully, if you're in a good situation, you're not going to have that pressure from above. Okay? But certainly, the number one problem in youth sports today are parents.
Yeah.
By far. And I remember coaching in high school and coaching JV and coaching varsity teams. The amount of phone calls I got in a week as an assistant coach and as the head JV coach kind of boggled my mind by why isn't so-and-so playing? Why isn't so-and-so playing? And I can remember when I was a player, if my dad ever did that, I'd have been ticked off at him for calling my coach without having me deal with it.
Right, because you want to be able to handle it as yourself as a player.
I'm the player.
And then you feel like you're in a rock and a hard place at that point.
Correct.
Because you're put between your coach and your parent.
Exactly.
Who do you choose? Who do you choose in that situation?
That's a hard, because they want to, you'd like to think kids like to please both. They want to please the parents, they want to please the coach. But they shouldn't have to be forced into that decision. So if there's parents that are going to listen to this, teach your kid, teach your student, teach your athlete how to handle situations like that. Don't do it for them. Because what are they going to learn? They're going to learn that, oh, mom and dad are always going to take care of that for me. But from a coaching standpoint, I listened to the parents, but that was it. They weren't going to influence my decision because I felt my decisions were just. I allowed them to talk to me. But at the end of the day, I would much rather have the athlete come up to me and say, hey, coach, why am I not playing?
More initiative from the athlete.
Much more.
Than
That's going to show that they have better character. They're willing to stand up for themselves. And, hey, maybe they're willing to learn, because if they're not doing something well enough, I can point that out further. This player's playing because he boxes out more, or whatever it might be. So what do we need to do in practice? You need to work out to block out better. You can do that at home. You can do whatever it might be. It's going to show initiative on the part of that athlete. But it's even at the college ranks that you hear of parents calling into coaches. It's like
at this point it should be a business.
It should be. It's not. We all know that. Coaches can always take the FERPA route. I can't talk about the student athlete because of FERPA. Whether that holds water or not, it's up to the coach. But bottom line, coaches, especially in the college ranks, they have there's no obligation to even talk to parents. And I know of coaches on this campus that will put that out. Don't call me because I'm not going to answer.
Right.
So, yeah.
Just to wrap up, what would you say to coaches, parents, and players out there right now, particular standpoint for each category of person? So players first.
Players first. So let's start with the players. Your coaches are there for a reason, because they were hired to do a job, because they have a certain skill set that the administrator or whoever hired them felt they can give. What you may not always 100% agree with your coach, and that's fine. But sometimes you can't show that. Your coach is there for a reason. Listen to them. Value them. Build that level of respect, because respect comes both ways. It comes from the players. It comes from the coach. Allow that to develop. If you allow that type of culture to develop, everybody's going to be better for it. So allow it. It may not happen overnight, but allow it. Invest yourself into it. If the coach says you need to do this, do it. If they're telling you need to work out more, work out more. Have faith in the coach. Value the coach, because they're there for a reason. Parents, again, the coach is hired for a reason. If you felt you had a better skill set, maybe you should have applied for the job, right? But allow the player and the coach to develop that relationship. You can't force it on either side. Allow it to develop. Have your kids go to practice and support them to invest whatever they need, whether it's time, whether it's shoes and whatever else. Be there as a support, but allow that student athlete to develop. You're only going to hinder them down the road if you think you have to take care of. And I get it. I'm a parent too. I want to take care of my kids' things, but I'm not. I'm hopefully bringing myself back. There's things that they're going to have to learn on their own. I can't always be there. So from a parent standpoint, just allow that to happen. Be supportive. But again, I think for that that professionalism line that we have with coaches and players, I think there's a similar line with parents and coaches, that there are things that just shouldn't happen. Be supportive. You may not like all the decisions, but this coach is doing it for a reason. There's a reason for those decisions. And hopefully that if you're supportive of them, that your athlete's going to see that, and hopefully they have that same mindset. We're going to talk about administrators.
Coaches.
And coaches.
Not administrators. We're going to leave them alone.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think so too.
Coaches. I think once you think you know everything, you're going to come up across a situation you never anticipated. Always be ready to learn, because there's always something to be learned, whether it's with a group, it's with an individual, because regardless of how many teams I've coached in the past, each one has a different makeup. They're all different. They may come from different age groups, but they all have their intricacies that you didn't really anticipate, because a team will grow differently, and allow that to grow, because you can't always expect the teams to have the same personality. And especially at the college rink, where you get new freshmen in every year, you're having seniors graduate, your makeup is inherently different. So you need to allow that to grow and not think they're always going to be the same. Always be ready to learn, because I think some coaches get stagnant. They're really not willing to look at different approaches, whether it be coaching from a psychological standpoint and X's and O's from a tactical standpoint. Always be willing to learn, because there's a lot of professional development that can take place that can make you a better coach. I'm still amazed with how many coaching books my wife will read during the summer, and she's the women's basketball coach here. It is amazing how much she is willing to learn, willing to invest into learning how to do something different next year. So always having that fresh approach, because I think if you get stagnant, your athletes will see that, and they're not that respect factor might start to wane because of that. So always be willing to learn and willing to implement new things.
Appreciate the time, Dr. Pietz.
Anytime.
Dr. Bruce Pietz from the physical education department, as well as the coaching minor department. It's always a pleasure, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, tune in for the rest of the videos later in the website. Go to the relationships tab, the home tab, about me tab, motivation tab. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of the videos.